Alright everybody, welcome back to another repair video. Today we have two speakers. One of them works and one of them doesn't. And we're gonna play a little tone here in a second just to kind of demonstrate. And here you can't really hear it very well, but if you're looking at the screen, the left speaker has a tone coming out of it, the right speaker does not. So we'll go ahead and turn off the speakers here and start to get to work. We'll start with cleaning it off a little bit because they are pretty messy. These are pretty old speakers that I've had for a while. I got them from an old office that I worked in several years ago. They've just been in our bathroom kind of as shower speakers, so nothing really super important, but if I can get one of these other speakers to work, that'd be great. Something else that I noticed here right off the bat, I'm just looking for physical signs here. The back of the left speaker, you can see that there's some kind of exposed frayed wires just put together with electrical tape. I'm imagining that that's going to be a point of failure. First thing off, we're just going to start unscrewing, see if we can get this front plate off. And there are about 6 screws here in the front. And if you've seen any of my videos before, you know I'm not the most professional person in the world. If you have a screwdriver with a magnetic tip, that'll be a lot better than what I'm using here. Do as I say, not as I do. Always be sure to set your screws aside in a safe place. You don't want to go and lose a whole bunch of them. So yeah, the next thing I'm gonna do here is remove this electrical tape here. It's kind of preventing me from pulling on the wires to get through here. Some of these wires are already repaired. There's some heat shrink around pretty much all 4 of these wires. They might have been soldered at one point. There's a lot of glue holding a lot of the components in place, kind of voiding the warranty here, so if you screw it up, you're not going to be able to take it to whoever you got these from and ask them to repair it. At a certain point, once I noticed how much glue there was all over the components, I just took a screwdriver and just went to town on them just to free up the wires there. But always be careful. You could, cut a wire at one point. You could chip away at the circuit board. There's also some glue right at the hole where the wires are coming in that's kind of preventing me from pushing them through. So that's the first place that I start. You can't really see a good image here of it, but there are also some zip ties inside of the casing or the housing, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, again, just slowly chipping away at the glue that's holding the wires, the circuit board, the whole thing in place. I don't know if there is a better way for removing components like this. And honestly, it ended up biting me in the butt along the way. You always risk damaging the whole thing, and the whole thing could end up not being salvageable. Treat this like you're defusing a bomb. Alright, we're almost there, free at last. I'm just doing a bit of a visual inspection of what everything's looking like. The first thing that I noticed right off the bat, and we'll get a closer look at this. So there are 4 wires coming out of the speaker or going into the speaker. There's a blue, white, red, and black. Right now I can see the zip tie that's in the back. I'm just cutting that off so yeah, you can't really get a good look at it, but there's a zip tie back there. They don't make it easy for you, but we're almost there. And the first thing that I notice is that the black wire is not connected to anything. It's just kind of free hanging. And bam, free at last. We got the cables pulled through. We're able to get just a little bit more here. We gotta take off. A little bit more glue. There you go, free at last. Now we can actually see what the inside of this thing looks like. And so, yep, there's a black wire right here. It's probably the ground or the neutral, not actually connected to anything. So we're just gonna need to figure that part out. And since I got sound coming out of one speaker and not out of the other, I'm assuming that this is going to be able to do it. And yep, I found the other connection right there. Just going to another place on this little circuit board here. So let's get a closer look. Like I said earlier, it looks like some of these wires have already been repaired once before. I'm just hoping that if I solder these 2 pieces together, it'll resolve everything. But always hope for the best, but expect the worst. Wishful thinking doesn't get everything done. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to strip back a little bit of the insulation or the shielding on these wires. Just going to try to get some bare copper exposed so that I can get this thing soldered. The shorter wire on this one is super tricky. And like I said, if you're a professional person who actually has wire strippers, the right tools make everything a lot easier. because here I'm just using some scissors, and it's not the best way to go about doing this, and I actually struggle with it quite a bit, so learn from my mistakes. As you can see here, it's just kind of hard to get a good grip on it. I'm able to strip away a little bit of it, but it's not a whole lot. I cut off a little bit of heat shrink just so that after soldering it, I can close it up so there isn't bare conductor exposed or bare wire. And just thread that through there. Just be a little careful, give it a little twist. Something that I would always screw up when I first started soldering things is I would solder it and I realized I did not put my heat shrink on beforehand. Right now I'm just going to try to twist these around each other, just kind of get a good grip so that they don't slide off during the soldering process. I end up having to go back and restrip that shorter cable. So I strip away a little bit more of the insulation there, give it another twist, and hopefully this time it stays. Alright, finally got a good connection here. I give it a little bit of a tug, not too crazy, just to make sure that it's secure. I get my helping hands here just to give me a helping hand. Stabilize the cable a little bit for when we actually start to solder this thing. We got our solder, we got our flux. We're going to take a little bit of flux. I'm going to take my screwdriver just here. I'm going to apply it a little bit to the actual copper conductor here. It helps clean and bind and kind of draw out the solder, so it's just kind of good practice. I don't have the best technique again. I don't know how much to apply. I'm just giving it enough. What looks enough to me? It's probably too much or not enough, who knows? If you have any advice, I'm always open to it. I get my solder, I dip the tip right into it too to clean off the tip. Again, flux helps clean some of the conductors, so we're going to zoom in here. My technique also, again, isn't the best. I'm going for putting the solder underneath the conductor and putting the solder itself on top, and hopefully it draws it from below. Something that I know other people have done, and what I should have done here that I didn't do, was put a little bit of solder on the tip of my soldering iron before actually starting this. But the idea is that it's going to draw the solder in between the two conductors here and get everything nice and bound together. Alright, it looks good enough. I'm just going to clean off my tip a little bit, see if I can get any bit more onto it. It looks good enough. I'm just going to clean off my tip again. Always be careful when you're working with a soldering iron. Turn it off when you're not using it. Secure it in a safe place. The connection looks good. I'm just going to move the heat shrink on top of it. But before I get too crazy, I'm going to do a little bit of testing. I'm going to turn on the speaker and do kind of the same test that we did before. I'm just going to have a tone generator pulled up on YouTube. Just going to play a little tone, see if it comes out. Unfortunately, it does not seem like it is coming out of that right speaker. It does feel like it's coming out of the left one, but I'm not feeling or hearing anything on the right speaker. I changed some of the dials, some of the knobs on it, just to see if there's anything tricky going on here that I can't tell. I'm just making sure for sure that it's coming out of the left one and not that right one. So back to the drawing board, and this is probably what is going to take the most amount of time on this, because I thought it was just going to be that one cable, but it turned out not to be the case. So the next thing we're going to have to do, let's open up this other one, see if there's a break in the line on the other side. I'm just going to pry off the grills. I'm just using, again, the flathead side of a screwdriver. As you can see, also pretty dang dirty, so we're just going to wipe it down a little bit. Just taking out some of the screws here. Something that I also noticed right now, you can see that there are like 2 cones in the front, or it looks like there should be 2 cones, but after actually looking at it, it doesn't look like there's anything connected to that bottom cone. It's just wires connected to the top one. So I don't know really why it's like that. I don't know if it's just false advertising or if there is a reason. If anybody in the comments knows, please let me know. This one is a little bit easier to pull out. It's not as component heavy. There is still, again, a bit of glue that's holding the speaker in place, or some of the wires of the speaker in place. And it looks like there's like an AC to DC transformer or inverter. I'm not sure exactly what the terminology is, but it turns that AC into DC current, I'm pretty sure. And I'm guessing that circuit board that's on the left speaker is what kind of controls volume attenuation, there's a technical word, gain, some of the pitch control. I'm inspecting some of the wires again. Most of this I'm just doing visually. I'm trying to figure out what is wrong here. I'm hoping it's just physical connections and nothing wrong with that circuit board, really. I'm also just trying to figure out exactly how these two speakers are connected. Nothing is really sticking out to me at this point. Everything looks solid from what I can tell just visually. Another piece of troubleshooting that you can do, because I'm wondering if the speaker on the right, the actual cone on the right speaker is faulty. So I've got a 9-volt battery here. My alligator clips, I'm just going to attach it to see if I can get a little bit of sound to come through, and you can kind of hear just a little bit coming through. If you've seen some of my other videos, you know that it doesn't take a lot just to trigger a speaker just to see if it moves, and it seems to do. The next thing I'm going to do, I have the multimeter out because I can't find anything visually wrong with anything. So I'm just taking my multimeter. I have it set on a continuity test. I'm looking at the cables and the wires again to see if there are any breaks. I'm just trying to follow the path of each wire so that I can understand exactly where they're going and if there are any breaks in it. So I'm trying the red one first. I'm just trying to figure out exactly. I'm using where it looks like on the circuit board it leads to. And you can see I'm getting some sort of resistance on it. And once you hear the beep, that means that there is continuity. Alright, we got a beep on the red wire here. That means that there is continuity. I'm not getting anything on the black wire. I'm testing other points where I can see bare conductor, bare wire exposed. Hopefully I'm able to get a good test there, but nothing's coming through. You know, also sometimes it's hard to tell whether or not your actual troubleshooting is the right way to go, because you could be, you know, testing the wrong wire, the wrong cable. The red wire tested good, so I'm hoping that my methodology is correct. And again, I'm just looking at that black wire because I'm not getting a continuity reading on it, so I'm still wondering if that is the case. The white and the blue wires are a little trickier, unfortunately. I didn't want to take the wire caps off of the white and blue cable just because I'm not as experienced with removing and then putting those back on, and I didn't want to solder any more than I have to. So I'm not able to do a continuity test on those, but the whole device still powers on, which suggests that it is correct. The next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to try to bypass the wires that are going from the circuit board through that long cable that connects the two. I'm just trying to bypass the black wire with some alligator clips, just jumping from one side to the other. I'm going to turn on the tone generator again to see if anything comes through. Always be careful because you got the components now and you got it plugged in. So I can feel a little bit of something coming through. It's definitely coming out of the left speaker, and I'm feeling some vibration on the right speaker. So now the next thing that I've done, I've already removed both of the speakers from their housing. I was getting a little bit of frustration on everything because it wasn't working as well as I was hoping. I started testing both of them just from the housing of the left speaker because that's where the signal seems to be coming through. I've cut the wires that are actually leading to the terminals on each of the speakers just so that I can remove them more easily. And I've been using the alligator clips to kind of jump from the red and black cables on the left speaker just to determine that both of the speakers are actually working themselves. Like I said, it's pretty frustrating at this point because I'm not 100% sure where the problem is. And the solution that I ended up coming up with probably wasn't the best, but it ended up getting the speakers to work. And I wasn't able to get a video of this because, like I said, it was getting pretty frustrating. Eventually what I found that worked is that I connected the red and black wires, and then from the terminal of the left speaker, I connected it to the terminal of the right speaker, and I was actually able to get signal on both of them. Now, I don't know if that circuit board would actually do like a stereo effect if you had left and right speakers, but since this is just, you know, old speakers that I'm not trying to do anything fancy on, I'm not trying to do surround sound on these speakers. If they're both carrying the same mono signal, that's fine by me. So the day is actually getting away from me. The sun is setting. So I don't record all of what I am about to do now, but I am going to put up just a visual aid so you can kind of basically see what I tried to do. So we have the two speakers. We have a left speaker and a right speaker. On the left speaker, we have two wires feeding into it. You have the actual like 3.2 millimeter or 1/8 inch headphone jack that is carrying two conductors into the housing of the left speaker into the circuit board. And we also have another cable that is carrying 4 conductors into the housing onto the circuit board. There doesn't seem to be any breaks on the input, and that's what I'm going to call the 1/8 inch jack going into the left speaker. And the 4 wires that we have coming in on the other side are a red, black, white, and blue. So I was able to determine that for sure the black wire was not conducting a signal, or it was failing the continuity test. The red wire was passing the continuity test. I wasn't able to actually test the white and blue wires because there wasn't any exposed conductor to really get my test on, and I didn't want to remove any more than I had to. When I tried to just bypass the wires themselves with the alligator clips going to the motherboard of the left speaker all the way to the terminals on the right speaker, I was able to get a little bit of a signal, but it was really grainy and really distorted, so I wasn't quite sure what was going on there. When I bypassed the whole circuit board and just went from the terminals that are on the left speaker to the right speaker, I got a clear signal coming out of both of the speakers. So the conclusion that I had was, let's not just bypass the wires, the red, black, blue, and whites. Let's just bypass the whole circuit board, at least from the signal side. The power side still seemed to be working fine, so I really shouldn't have had to do what I was about to do. I couldn't figure out the best way to bypass the red and black wires because one, I couldn't really feed another one through that sheath, and I couldn't really just run a single wire from one to the other. I got some other cable that I have from my random jobs. It's just a 2-conductor, 18 gauge audio cable, speaker cable that I've had from when I used to install speakers. So what I ended up having to do, I cut off the 4-wire connection between the 2 speakers. I just straight up cut it. I used the 18-2 conductor. I had about 4 wires that I needed to solder together, and it ended up being a lot of work. I wasn't able to get a video of it because it was about 8 connections of soldering that I had to do. I didn't really mind because I enjoy getting just to do the practice of it all. But here is a photo of what it all kind of looked like. And always try to get photos of it because at one point I put all my heat shrink all together and I couldn't actually remember what wires were connected where. Because another thing that I messed up on, and I probably could have done this better, but all the 18-2 wire that I had was all white. I probably could have just marked one of the ends for the blue and white and the red and black, but I'm a lazy bones person who didn't do it and had to end up cutting away some of the heat shrink just to see exactly what connections I did and where. And there was probably better wire that you could use. I even thought about using Cat 5e wire to see if that would be enough, but I was not sure if the gauge, because it was a solid core conductor as opposed to twisted. So if anybody, again, in the comments has any suggestions on whether or not this could have worked. Alright, so this is actually the next day. I pretty much turned off the camera and just went at it without the distraction of having the camera going. Here you can see one of the connections, and you can see I have 2 cables of 18-2 wire going in between the 2 speakers, and I decreased the distance by quite a bit. So I took the cables that are flowing out of this one, I cut it off of one end and connected here. So there are 4 wires that are connecting to each other, and I'll put up the visual again here. I just kind of zip tied it all together so it wouldn't be hanging. And this is where it was really difficult to push the cables through. But here you can also see I got the white or yellow and blue wires connecting to two pieces there, or the two wires that are coming through, and the other wires I have going directly to the terminal of the left speaker. And then I had to solder all those points together. So it wasn't 8, it was about 10 connections in total I had to solder. Another thing that I didn't really account for at the end of all this was that the 18.2 cables were so thick that putting this thing all back together was really tricky. So if you have maybe thinner gauge or smaller gauge cable, that would be ideal. But this is just what I had on hand to make everything work. And like I said, you know, be super careful. You don't want to break any of the components now. You've done all this work. It'd be a shame to, at the end of the day, break a circuit board and then the whole thing doesn't work. I wouldn't suggest doing stuff like this on electronics that you really want to have working. Go to professional if it's something that you actually have to get done correctly. But you know, you also have to, if you want to practice, you got to have something to practice on. So we're just putting the screws back. Luckily I was able to get everything to fit. It took some wiggling around. I kind of had to use a screwdriver just to push some cables around. I already put the screws and the housing and the grills back on the right speaker. I'm not really quite sure what gauge the actual wires were that were in the speaker, but like I said, they were a bit smaller than the 18.2. We're putting the grill back on the left speaker, and then just kind of snaps in place, but it can be a little tricky, so you might need to use the screwdriver for leverage. Alright, now the moment of truth. We're going to plug in the speakers, get some power flowing. We're going to get our iPad back out. We're just going to get that tone generator going. I'm going to turn it on. We got tone going. You can feel it on the left one. We can feel it on the right one. And now I'm just putting my face up to it just to make sure. We got the thumbs up. We're good to go. I don't know how to do a thumbs up from this angle, so you got a bunch of them. But thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section below. Please like, share, and subscribe.